Welcome back to the deep dive. We are shifting gears today. Usually we are out here tackling these, big sweeping concepts.
Right, like the history of empires or the mechanics of the global economy.
Exactly. But today I want to try an experiment. I want to see if we can find just as much history and just as much sociology, really, by zooming in on 3 minutes and 25 seconds of audio.
Recorded in 1979.
Yeah, 1979. So this is a microhistory.
It absolutely is. We are looking at a single track from a single album by a band that is often celebrated for their melodies, but perhaps underanalyzed for their anthropology.
The band is Squeeze.
Right, Squeeze. The album is Cool for Cats, and the specific song we are looking at is called It's Not Cricket.
And I have to say, when you first suggested this, I thought, okay, a pop song. How deep can it really go?
And then you read the lyric sheet.
I read the lyric sheet you sent over, and I realized I needed a dictionary, a map of Southeast London, and possibly a lawyer to understand what was actually going on.
It's dense.
It felt less like a song and more like a crime report written in some kind of code.
That is exactly what it is. It is a perfect time capsule.
Yeah.
Because if you want to understand the texture of working class life in Deptford or Rotherhithe in the late 70s, you could read a history book, sure.
Right. You could look up the economic data.
You could. But this song gives you the smell of the pub. It gives you the sticky floor of the dance hall and the very specific anxieties of a young man trying to navigate this world of geezers.
And that is our mission for today's deep dive. We're going to decode this thing for you. Because to the uninitiated listener, and I definitely count myself in that camp before I did the reading for this song is just a minefield of slang.
Oh, completely.
We've got beanos, tossers, minces, pink cards. It sounds like nonsense.
But every single one of those words is a key.
Right.
A key that unlocks a very specific part of the culture. It is a lyrical obstacle course.
A lyrical obstacle course. I love that description.
And what is really fascinating is that the songwriters, Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook, they weren't just writing nonsense rhymes to fit a beat.
They were documenting something real.
They were documenting a language that was, in many ways, already starting to die out. They were capturing the specific vernacular of the Deptford mob before it vanished or morphed into whatever it is today.
So let's set the scene for the listener before we get into the first verse. We were in 1979.
Right.
This isn't the swinging 60s anymore. It's not the summer of love. What is the actual atmosphere we are stepping into here?
It's gritty. It is very gritty. We are in Southeast London. We are talking about the Deptford mob.
So not the tourist version of London.
No, not at all. This isn't the polished, gentrified London of today where you might, buy a 5-pound artisanal coffee in a converted warehouse.
Right.
This is industrial. It's distinctly working class. It's a culture centered entirely around the pub, the weekend, and this specific geezer persona.
The geezer. That's a term that gets thrown around a lot, even now. I mean, Guy Ritchie movies made an absolute fortune off that word.
They did.
But what does it mean in this specific 1979 Southeast London context?
In this context, it's really a performance of masculinity.
Okay.
A geezer is a lad. He's a man's man. He's sharp, he's streetwise, he's probably a little bit dodgy, but above all, he is loyal to his mates.
A code of honor among thieves kind of thing.
Exactly. And as we see in the song, maintaining that persona is exhausting.
Because there's so many rules.
Yes. You have to be tough, you have to be sexually prolific, and you have to be able to drink absolutely everyone under the table.
And you have to adhere to the code. Which brings us perfectly to the title of the track. It's not cricket.
Right, the core concept.
Now, I know cricket is a sport. It involves tea breaks and matches that can literally last for days.
Sometimes 5 days, yes.
But the phrase, it's not cricket, that carries a lot more weight than just saying, hey, that's against the rules of the game, doesn't it?
It's the ultimate British idiom for fairness.
Fairness.
Yeah. Cricket traditionally was known as the gentleman's game. It had this incredibly strict moral code attached to it.
You didn't cheat.
You didn't cheat. You applauded the opposition when they did well. You accepted the umpire's decision without a single complaint.
So it's about honor.
Precisely. So in general conversation, if you say to someone that their behavior is not cricket, you are saying it's dishonorable. It's fundamentally unsportsmanlike.
It implies a certain moral high ground then.
It does. And this is where the genius of the song kicks in right from the start. The narrator is using this high-minded, very gentlemanly phrase to describe a situation that is completely devoid of gentlemen.
It feels incredibly ironic. I mean, reading through these lyrics, This narrator is essentially the town gossip.
Yes.
He's spilling the absolute worst dirt on everyone he knows.
That's the central tension of the whole track. The premise is that the narrator is telling us, the listener, all these scandalous, deeply personal stories about his friends.
But he keeps stopping himself.
Yes. He keeps stopping and saying, well, I can't name names because that wouldn't be cricket.
He's claiming he can't reveal their identities because it wouldn't be honorable.
Right. He wants it both ways.
That is so rich. So he's perfectly fine with telling us about their sexual mishaps, their medical infections, their drunken humiliations. But he draws the line at saying, oh, by the way, that was Dave.
Exactly. He wants the thrill of the gossip, but he desperately wants to maintain the self-image of the loyal mate who respects the code of silence.
It's a very human contradiction, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's that classic thing of, well, I'm not one to gossip, but did you hear about what happened down at the Surrey docks?
Well, let's go to the Surrey docks, because that's where the first character shows up. The first verse introduces us to a woman, and the description is, well, it's vivid.
It sets the tone immediately.
The lyric is, she used to do a topless down at the Surrey docks.
Doing a topless.
Which is such an odd phrasing.
It's a phrasing you just don't hear anymore. It sounds almost bureaucratic, doesn't it?
Like doing a shift at the factory.
Exactly, like doing a shift. But yes, it refers to working as a topless dancer. And the geography here really matters.
The Surrey docks.
Yes, located in Rotherhithe, right on the River Thames in southeast London. In the late 70s, the docks were in serious decline, but the culture there was still very rough and tumble.
So this wasn't some glamorous cabaret club in Soho.
No, not at all. This was a local venue for dock workers and heavy drinkers. It was raw.
And then we get this detail that I honestly thought was just a joke until I read the source notes you provided. The line says, with tassels on her whatsits.
Yes, the tassels.
Now, whatsits is clearly a euphemism. We can all gather that. But the tassels part, was that just a fashion statement for the era? Was that the trend?
You might think so, but it's actually a fascinating window into the British legal system at the time.
Really? How so?
The source material points out that 1970s English society was strangely prudish, yet prurient at the exact same time.
A weird mix.
Very weird. There were extremely strict licensing laws regarding full nudity in venues that served alcohol.
So you couldn't just have a fully nude dancer in a pub?
Not legally. No, in many cases you absolutely could not. So the tassels, the nipple covers, they were a legal loophole.
A workaround for the law.
Exactly, it was a workaround. By covering that tiny, specific percentage of the body, the venue could legally claim she wasn't fully nude.
And therefore they weren't breaking the licensing laws.
Right. It's this absurd, uniquely British compromise. We want the titillation, but we also really want to follow the rules on paper.
It reminds me of those old liquor laws where you had to serve a meal to be able to serve alcohol. So bars would have one single moldy sandwich that they just passed around from table to table.
It's exactly that same energy. It's compliance theater.
Yeah.
But the song adds this great layer of humor to it.
Yeah.
The source actually mentions that these dancers would develop specific physical skills to, and this is a quote, accentuate contra-rotation.
Spinning them in opposite directions.
Yes.
That sounds like a physics experiment gone wrong.
Yeah. Or gone right, depending entirely on your perspective. But it really humanizes the scene. It's not just saying, oh, she was a stripper. It's the specific detail of the tassels and the contra-rotation that roots it so firmly in that era.
But the narrator isn't just watching her work. He's actively judging who she hangs out with after work.
He's very judgmental.
He says, she went with all the tossers who kick about a ball.
Here we go. Tossers.
Now, I feel like Americans hear this word in British sitcoms, and they generally know it's bad, but what is the specific cultural flavor of the word tosser?
It's very dismissive. A tosser is a jerk, an idiot. It's someone who is completely full of themselves, but has absolutely no substance to back it up.
Where does the word come from?
Well, it's derived from a masturbatory reference originally, implying that someone is useless. But here, he's applying it specifically to those who kick about a ball.
Footballers. Or soccer players, for the North American listeners.
Yes. Now, in working class culture, local footballers are usually the heroes.
They're idolized.
They are the absolute gods of the community. But our narrator and the dancer herself, they see right through them.
Because the lyrics say, they say their club's the greatest, which implies the players are just bragging about their team or their local status.
Right. They are posturing. They're doing the whole, don't you know who I am? I play for the local club routine.
But the dancer isn't impressed.
No, the lyric says she has kissed them all.
Which, knowing Squeeze and the tone of this album, is probably a euphemism for a lot more than just kissing.
Almost certainly. The implication here is that she actually holds the power in this dynamic.
How so?
Because they were strutting around the pub like peacocks, bragging about their football club, but she has seen them naked, vulnerable, probably quite desperate.
She knows the reality behind the facade.
Exactly. She knows the truth behind the geezer mask. She knows they are just tossers.
It's a great setup. And then the verse moves to a location that really caught my attention when I was prepping for this.
The Arndale Center.
Yes, the Arndale Center.
Yeah.
The line is, at the Arndale Center, she's up against the wall.
It's a very striking image.
It is, because to me, a shopping center is where I go to buy sneakers or get a soft pretzel. It doesn't exactly scream illicit romance to me.
And that's because you are looking at it through modern eyes, where malls are just everyday utilities.
Right.
But in the late 70s, the Arndale centers were an absolute revolution in Britain. They were the very first American-style, fully indoor shopping malls in the country.
So they were a big deal.
A massive deal. There were these huge concrete spaces. The one in Wandsworth, which this lyric likely refers to, was actually the largest indoor shopping space in all of Europe when it first opened.
So it was really a symbol of the future.
It was the ultimate symbol of modernity for that area. It was supposed to be clean, it was highly commercial, and above all, it was respectable.
It was the new Britain.
Exactly, where the new Britain was supposed to happen. And what does Squeeze do with that pristine symbol?
They put their character up against the wall in it.
They absolutely desecrate the Temple of Commerce.
It's such a brilliant contrast.
It shows that no matter how much concrete you pour or how many shiny new shops you build, human nature is going to win out. The gritty, messy reality of the Deptford mob is going to find a way in.
The sterile environment of the mall versus the raw sexuality of the act itself.
Yes. It's a very deliberate juxtaposition by the songwriters.
It really paints a vivid picture of a restless generation, doesn't it? They don't have anywhere private to go.
They really don't.
They have the local pub, the decaying docks, and now this shiny new mall. And they're just trying to find some kind of release in all of these public or semi-public spaces.
And that search for release leads us directly into the consequences, which we see in verse 2.
Yeah, the song definitely doesn't let them just stay at the party.
No, it drags us right into the hangover.
This shift is where the song gets a bit darker for me. We leave the topless dancer, and we focus on a male character. The narrator says, "I saw them at the pictures, a tangled heap of love."
The pictures. Again, that's classic British slang for the cinema or the movie theater.
And a tangled heap of love is such a wonderfully messy image.
It is. It's not a polished Hollywood romance.
No.
It's just arms and legs and clumsy, heavy petting in the back row of the cinema.
And the narrator describes this guy as a real player. He says he had so many women, but only classy stuff.
The sarcasm in that delivery is just lethal, classy stuff.
He's really mocking his friend's pretensions.
Completely. This guy genuinely thinks he's a Casanova. He thinks he's dating high society women, or at least the local equivalent.
But then we get the punchline.
And it is a very harsh medical punchline.
The lyric is, "I saw him at the clinic, a pink card up his cuff."
This is the detail that I think is the most potent time capsule moment in the entire track.
Break this down for us, because today everything is digital, right?
Yeah.
You get a text message from your doctor or a secure email. What exactly is a pink card?
Right, so we are firmly in the pre-digital age here. If you went to a clinic for sexually transmitted diseases, an STD clinic, you were issued a physical appointment card. And in many places across Britain at the time, these cards were color-coded or just instantly recognizable by their design. The pink card.
So walking around with that specific pink card was essentially like wearing a neon sign that said, "Hey everyone, I have an infection."
Exactly that. It was an instant tell. And look at where he puts it. Up his cuff.
He's hiding it up his sleeve.
He's absolutely terrified of being seen with it. In the previous verse, we had people up against the wall in the shopping mall, brazen, totally public, didn't care who saw them.
Wait, but now...
Now, faced with the medical consequence, the shame really kicks in. He's sliding that pink card up his sleeve so his mates don't accidentally see it.
It really speaks volumes about the heavy stigma surrounding sexual health at the time.
It does. It's that contrast, again, between the geezer projection, the whole "I have so many women" routine.
Versus the reality.
The reality being, I am terrified of being judged by other men for catching something.
And the narrator sees it. He observes this moment of panic. He knows exactly what the pink card means.
But he doesn't name him.
Right, because it's not cricket.
Exactly. It's not cricket to say, "Hey, Steve has gonorrhea." He just lets the brutal image of the pink card sit there in the lyric.
It's so brutally effective.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how vulnerable these guys actually are behind all that bravado and swagger.
That's the key to understanding the whole album, really. The song is funny, it has this bouncy rhythm, but it's also quite pathetic in the true sense of the word.
It evokes pity.
Yes. You feel sorry for them, even as you laugh at them.
Okay, so we've had the public sex, we've had the medical consequences.
Yeah.
Now we move to verse 3 and we get into the group dynamics.
The lad's holiday.
The lad's holiday.
Ah.
This feels like a mandatory rite of passage for this specific demographic.
It absolutely is. The lyrics transport us out of London to Bognor. The line is, "One holiday in Bognor, a stag night hit the town."
Why Bognor? For our international listeners who might be listening to this deep dive, or even just people who aren't familiar with 1970s British tourism, what does Bognor signify?
Bognor Regis is a seaside resort on the south coast of England.
Yeah.
But it's not, how do I put this?
It's not the French Riviera.
No, it's not St. Tropez. It's a very domestic destination. It's pebble beaches, it's windbreaks because the weather is usually terrible, it's fish and chips and newspaper and cheap amusement arcades.
So it's affordable.
Very affordable. It's accessible by train. It's where you go for a traditional, slightly budget British holiday.
So it's seen as a bit uncool.
It's just very, very normal, pedestrian. But for a stag night, which is the British equivalent of a bachelor party, it becomes a temporary playground.
And on this stag night, the inevitable happens. The song says the groom was in the car park with his trousers down.
It's almost a cliche of British culture, isn't it?
Totally.
The groom, presumably heavily drunk, being publicly humiliated in a parking lot by his friends, it captures the messiness of British drinking culture perfectly.
The goal of the stag night isn't really to celebrate the groom, is it?
No, the goal is often to ritualistically humiliate him before he gets married, to strip him of his dignity one last time.
But then the narrator invokes the code again. He stops the story right there and says, but that's another story that won't be going around.
Won't be going round. That means it won't be circulated. It won't be repeated in the pub back home.
This is the omerta of Deptford.
Precisely. What happens in the Bognor car park stays in the Bognor car park.
It's a rigid social contract.
It is. And it's vital for the actual survival of their social group.
How so?
Because if they actually told the truth about what everyone did when they were that drunk and vulnerable, the group would just fall apart from the embarrassment and the fighting.
The not cricket rule preserves the friendship.
Yes, even if that friendship is based on a collective lie of omission.
Speaking of group activities and heavy drinking, we have to talk about verse 4. This, to me, felt like the absolute centerpiece of the culture they're describing.
I agree completely.
It centers around a word that I had honestly never heard before doing this research. The bino.
Ah, yes, the bino. This is a term that has almost completely fallen out of everyday usage now, but it was a massive tiller of working-class London life for decades.
The line is, the Deptford had a beano to Southend for the night.
So let's unpack the etymology of that word first. Bino is actually short for bean feast.
Which, I have to say, sounds like a truly terrible meal.
It does sound quite unappetizing. Originally, going way back in history, a bean feast was an annual dinner given by employers for their workers.
Okay, so a work dinner.
Yeah, they would serve roast beef, beer, and yes, broad beans. But by the 20th century, and certainly by the time Squeeze was writing this in the late 70s, the term had evolved significantly.
What did it mean to them?
A beano was an annual day trip, usually organized by the workplace or often by the local pub or working men's social club.
So it's kind of like a company retreat.
Well, think less about trust falls and whiteboards and more about a chartered bus and total uninhibited oblivion.
Got it.
The employer or the social club would pay for the coach, maybe pay for a slap-up meal somewhere, and everyone would pile in and head out to a beauty spot or the seaside.
And the destination for this particular beano is Southend.
Southend-on-Sea, yes. It's located about 40 miles east of London. It's very famous for having the longest leisure pier in the world.
So it's a classic getaway.
It's the classic East End playground. You go there to eat cockles by the shore, ride the rickety roller coasters, and above all, to drink.
And the drinking is heavily emphasized in the lyrics. They specify with 40 crates of lager to see the Southend lights.
40 crates. I just want you to visualize that for a second. This is for a single bus trip.
It's industrial scale consumption. It's staggering.
It is, and it tells you right away that the sights, the famous Southend lights and the illuminations that turn on after dark, they are completely secondary.
Right, the primary mission is intoxication.
Complete intoxication before they even arrive.
The source notes mention a specific illustration from 1976 that depicts one of these Deptford beanos. It sounds absolutely chaotic.
Oh, it's a masterpiece of chaos. The illustration depicts the band and their whole entourage of friends on one of these exact trips.
And it features Jules Holland, right?
Yes. Jules Holland, the keyboard player, he's drawn as this motorbike greaser with long hair.
Which is a look I cannot even imagine on Jules Holland today, considering his usual sharp suits and boogie-woogie piano style.
No, indeed, it's a far cry from his modern image. And in the drawing, he's actually having his piano moved by members of the Hells Angels.
Naturally, just a casual day out.
And the speech bubbles from the crowd in the illustration are just pure carnage.
What are they saying?
People are shouting for tarts, they're asking around for dope, and characters are saying they feel shick, which the artist spells S-H-I-C-K.
A phonetic spelling of someone too drunk to say sick.
Exactly. It captures the sheer noise of the event, the smell of stale beer on the coach, the shouting, the smoke. It wasn't a polite outing to look at the lights, it was a mobile riot.
And the lyric confirms the outcome of this riot. It says, they got home for their breakfast, pissed out of their minds.
And again, for the American listeners tuning in, pissed here means drunk.
Right, not angry.
100% drunk, not annoyed. They stumbled off that bus at dawn completely and utterly wasted.
It sounds physically exhausting.
And it was, but you have to remember it was also highly communal. It was a shared, necessary release valve.
Because their daily lives were so structured.
Yes, you worked hard on the docks or in the factories all week, life was tough, and then once a year you went on the bino and just lost your mind together. It bonded them as a community.
So we've survived the bino, we've survived the stag night in Bognor. Now we finally come to the final verse.
Verse 5.
And this is where the narrator actually steps out of the shadows. He stops being just the passive observer of everyone else's mess, and he tries to be the protagonist of his own story.
He finally tries to get in on the action himself.
Right.
And the language he uses here hits absolute peak Cockney.
The line is, this girl gave me the minces, so I asked her for a dance.
Gave me the minces.
I feel like if I said that to someone today, they'd think I was handing them a plate of ground beef.
It does sound like a strange culinary exchange. But this is Cockney rhyming slang in its purest, most functional form.
Walk us through the equation for this one. How do we get from minces to what he actually means?
Okay, so the core word we want to communicate is eyes. The rhyming phrase for eyes is mince pies.
Okay, mince pies equals eyes. Got it.
But, and this is the vital rule that always trips people up when they try to use rhyming slang, you usually drop the actual rhyming part of the phrase.
Oh, really?
Yes, you don't say look at her mince pies. You just say look at her minces.
So she gave me the minces means she was giving me the eye.
Exactly. She was looking at him. She was checking him out. Or, more likely, given what happens next in the song, he completely misinterpreted a random glance as romantic interest.
Because he assumes he's the man. He's the geezer. He asks for a dance. And then he says, and in the death I kissed her, and so I took a chance.
In the death, that's more slang, meaning at the end.
Like at the end of the night.
Yeah, at the end of the night or the end of the dance. It's the final moment, the moment of truth.
And how does this big moment of truth play out for our confident narrator?
Disastrously. The very next lyric is, and when I went to touch her, she tried to break my arm.
Whoa, that escalated incredibly quickly.
It's a violent, sudden pivot. We've got this whole song about these geezers posturing, lads on holiday, bragging about women.
Right.
And finally, when the narrator tries to enact this romance that he thinks he's entitled to, he gets physically, brutally rejected.
And not just a polite no thanks.
No, she literally tries to break his arm.
It totally undercuts his authority as the storyteller, doesn't it?
Completely.
He's been judging everyone else the whole time. The tossers at the football club, the guy hiding the pink card. He's been acting like he's this cool, detached observer who knows better than them.
But when he actually steps into the ring himself, he gets crushed instantly. It strips away his geezer armor. It shows the listener that beneath all the clever slang and the swaggering attitude, there's a lot of confusion and, frankly, a lot of failure.
It turns the song from a celebration of this lifestyle into a bit of a critique of it.
A very sharp critique, disguised as a bouncy pop song.
And speaking of that critique, we have to discuss the actual vocal performance.
The voice is crucial here.
Because when you listen to this track, if you know Squeeze at all, you know Glenn Tilbrook generally has this very sweet, almost Paul McCartney-esque voice.
Very melodic.
But on the other, It's not cricket. He sounds rough.
He sounds like he's been gargling gravel and cigarette ash before stepping up to the microphone. He is very clearly putting on a character.
The source notes mention that he's actually often mistaken for Jules Holland on this specific track because the vocals just so drastically different from his usual style.
Yes, a lot of fans get that wrong. Glenn's adopting a persona. He's acting out the role of the narrator.
Who is he trying to emulate?
He was heavily influenced by Ian Dury.
Ian Dury of Sex and Drugs and rock and roll fame.
The very same. Dury was the absolute master of this kind of music hall punk style.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, he exaggerated his Cockney accent. He sang his lyrics in this rhythmic, highly theatrical way rather than strictly hitting notes.
So Glenn Tilbrook is channeling that Ian Dury energy.
Exactly. He's trying to sound like one of the hard men holding up the bar in the Deptford pub.
It says here in the notes that Glenn was actually quite critical of his own performance years later. He said his attempt, quote, as a geezer, wasn't entirely successful.
He felt he didn't quite nail the authenticity of it. He felt it sounded put on.
But his bandmate disagreed.
Yes, Chris Difford, who wrote the lyrics, disagreed completely. He called the vocal delivery inspired. He said it gave the song a necessary cabaret sound.
I have to say, I side with Difford on this one.
Me too!
Because the whole song is fundamentally about performance, isn't it?
It's all a facade.
The footballers are performing their success. The stag party is performing wildness to hide their mundane lives. The guy with the pink card is desperately performing health.
Right.
So having the singer audibly perform the accent fits perfectly with the themes of the lyrics.
It adds this brilliant layer of meta-commentary. It's a caricature of a caricature. If he had sung it in his usual sweet, melodic voice, that irony just wouldn't work.
It needs that rough, theatrical edge to sell the joke.
It does. It cements the narrator as part of the world he's mocking.
So we reach the end of the song. The narrator has been rejected. His arm is nearly broken by the girl with the minces, and he signs off the track with one last bit of slang.
The final excuse.
He says, I can't name names because that's not cricket. But that's another story in the finish.
In the finish. Which is just another casual way of saying in the end.
He circles right back to his original excuse.
He does. He's told us absolutely everything. He's exposed the flaws of his entire community, but he maintains his personal honor by simply withholding their legal names.
When we step back and look at this track as a whole, this 3-minute tour of 1979 Deptford, why does it matter?
That's the big question.
Why should we, or the listener, care about minces and beanos 40-plus years later?
Well, Chris Difford reflected on this specifically in the sources. He noted that as he got older, his songwriting naturally became much more personal.
More about his own internal feelings and struggles.
Yes, but it's not. Cricket was pure external observation. It was reportage.
He was acting like a journalist with a guitar.
Exactly. He was just watching the room and writing it down. And because of that observational style, this song preserved a world that has largely disappeared.
The physical spaces are gone.
The Surrey docks are mostly luxury riverside apartments now. The sprawling Arndale centers have been heavily remodeled or completely demolished.
And the culture itself has shifted.
The bino is basically a relic of the past. If Squeeze hadn't written this down, and crucially, if they hadn't used the specific hyperlocal words of the time, we would have lost that cultural texture forever.
It's so interesting to think about language as a map. If you don't know what a pink card is, you miss an entire social history of shame and medicine in the 70s.
And if you don't know what a beano is, you miss the history of how the working class found communal joy in a really harsh industrial environment.
The song acts as a glossary for a lost civilization.
It really does. It turns all of this unsportsmanlike behavior into lasting art.
That's the ultimate irony of the whole piece. The narrator claims it's not cricket to tell these tales. He claims he shouldn't be doing it at all.
But thank God he did.
Because he failed to keep the secret, we get to keep the history.
That's beautifully put, and I think that's the core value of looking at pop culture through this kind of lens.
So here's the final takeaway for you, the listener. Language is constantly evolving. It never stops.
Never.
The slang you use today, the words you use for someone who's cool or crazy or drunk, those are your version of minces and beanos.
They are the artifacts of your specific time and place.
And one day, someone might be doing a deep dive on your old text messages or social media posts, trying desperately to decode what you actually meant.
A slightly terrifying thought, to be honest.
Very terrifying. But in the meantime, I want to leave you with a challenge. Keep your ears open. The next time you watch an old British film or read a book set in the 70s, See if you can spot a beano.
See if anyone is heading down to the pictures.
And if you see someone behaving badly, cutting in line, or cheating at a game, you know exactly what to say to them.
That's not cricket.
That's not cricket.
It really isn't.
Thank you for helping us decode the Deptford mob today. It's been a really fascinating trip to the seaside.
A pleasure. Just please don't ask me to move a piano with the Hells Angels anytime soon.
I wouldn't dream of it. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.